and we have at least a little bit of an audience, we can go ahead. Oh, use the Q&A tab. Okay. Thanks, Claudia. So yeah, if you're in the audience, if you have a question that you want brought up to the panel, please go to the Q&A tab on the far right within the session box there. But now that we're starting here, how about we go around the room, around the table, and introduce ourselves so we know what kind of opinions we have on here. There's Allison. So I'll be moderating the event. I'm Jacob Heck. I'm the Great Lakes Regional Geodetic Advisor for the National Geodetic Survey in the U.S. I'm located in Michigan, and I'll be asking questions. Claire, would you like to go next?
Sure. Kia ora everyone, I'm Claire Buxton. I am a New Zealander, if you can't tell by the accent, but I am living in Vancouver, Canada at the moment. I'm a party chief / project manager for Untitled Geomatics, but I am here representing the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program, which is a Young Surveyors Network run program.
Okay, Ryan?
Sure, hello, Ryan Hippensteel. I'm the Field Operations Branch Chief for NOAA's National Geodetic Survey. I run my team out of our Norfolk, Virginia location, and we have surveyors that go nationwide into territories and sometimes international. So my background, I've been at NGS for 5 years, and I have a background in both the private sector and other federal agencies. So I've kind of seen both sides of the fence a bit, and have enjoyed this role at NGS. So thanks for the opportunity to chat with you all today.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Davey, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Davey McDowell. I am the Chief Operating Officer at NCEES, and that's the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying, which is why we always just do it by acronym because it's too long to get out, especially for a Southerner. I'm located in Greenville, South Carolina. NCEES, if you don't know kind of what we do, our claim to fame, I guess, is being the organization that puts together the exams for engineers and surveyors, and we'll talk about surveyors mostly today, right? So we put together the exam for surveyors to be licensed, both the fundamentals of surveying and the principles and practice of surveying exams.
All right, thank you, Davey. Omar?
Hi, everybody. My name is Omar Mora. I'm an assistant professor at Cal Poly Pomona, which is located in Southern California. Been here for about 6 years, and just a pleasure to be here. And thank you for the invite, Jacob. Always a pleasure, supporting in any way I can.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Omar. And I keep trying to add Allison, and she keeps dropping off. So we'll get her added to the panel here once we're able. But when we were putting this panel together, we wanted to get some different opinions from not just different areas geographically, not just different types of people, education level, but we wanted to get the opinion of, well, what happened in academia, what happened within industry, what happened in government, what happened with volunteer organizations, and that way we can see how common things were, but also how unique things were too, as we go across different experiences and backgrounds. Now, throughout this event, I'll be checking my WhatsApp as well, just because there's always technical difficulties with this kind of thing. So if I'm distracted, please forgive me. Now, I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but please, if you're in the audience, this is a great group of people to ask. How did the last year treat you? So I prepared a few questions, so I'll go ahead. And there's Allison. Can we hear you, Allison?
Hello.
You there,
Sorry,
Allison?
I had internet difficulties.
Yet another challenge of 2020 into 2021. Allison, would you like to introduce yourself to the panel? or to the audience?
My name is a plan surveyor. I've been work since the beginning of it in 20 Wisconsin.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Yeah, and I'm glad that you're here to provide yet another perspective to the panel. Being a small business owner, being from the northern part of the country, and I'm sure things impacted you differently than they impacted others on the call here. And we'll deal with the internet challenges as they come about. So I think the first thing I wanted to ask about was, when did you know that this was going to be disruptive? I mean, think back to March of last year as things slowly and then quickly started shutting down. How did you know that this was something that you were going to have to really shift gears on? But also, when did you start to see the magnitude of it too? And anyone can jump in to start with.
I'll kind of start real quick, and then we can kind of move on from there. I think it is an interesting time, obviously, for almost everybody in the country. Being on the East Coast, we kind of saw it creeping across the country, right? And so it was somewhat of mid-March that we, as an organization, always have a kind of a senior leadership meeting, and we were in that meeting discussing, is this a real thing? Is this possibly going to happen? We're in early March, I guess. And we just kind of decided, and we made a good decision. Like, I think let's start making some calls, decision wise, for issues that were going to affect us in April and May and June. And not to say we got it right, but I think we made some pretty quick decisions, just because we could see kind of a trend coming across the country a little bit. So, from our standpoint and from our point of view, I think we were pretty quick to recognize the severity of it. But again, we didn't necessarily get everything right by any means.
Go for it, Ryan. It's like, who's got this quickest to unmute? So I guess I can bring in some perspective from the international side of things. Our team wasn't actually formed in March. At that time, we were a small group of us, including the past chair, Mel, and Kwabena, the current chair, were writing what is now a 4-year way forward plan for the VCSP. And I actually presented that a year ago today. I guess at that time, I personally definitely underestimated how long we were going to be dealing with this for. But we did look at how we can run workshops and how we can do in-country deployments in a way that was going to still allow us to continue while still keeping our young surveyors safe when they're volunteering. So we introduced, we thought it was likely we would have to do a wisdom workshop online, and that, I mean, on the fundraising side of things, that was all learning for us anyway. But you have to definitely get a lot more creative when you're trying to get funding during a pandemic. But the kind of learning that I was trying to find at the time was, don't stop doing what you're doing. And I'm really glad we did that, because we're still here a year later and we've achieved what we wanted to. So that's all I have to add on that. Go for it, Ryan.
Yeah, it's funny looking back on it now. In retrospect, it's almost like we were naive at the time when you look at how great the impact was now. You know, being somebody that had multiple staff members out on field assignments, traveling, those first, as things were kind of ramping up there at the beginning of the year, we were having discussions about how to keep people in the field safe, and you know, what protocols we might need to add. And then it just seemed like overnight we were pulling people in. And then we actually spent some time, I'm sure others did too, thinking about how we were going to get back to work. And again, quickly, our time horizon was, you know, we just thought we were going to have to wash our hands and use those types of protocols, and we'd be back in the field in a month. So we were writing documentation right away. And then again, it just seemed like overnight, it was like, nope, this is very long term. So I felt like it went in phases. It took me a little bit of time to kind of re-gear, retool most of my folks to be working on stuff that we could handle in the office, data processing, and working for other divisions and branches within NGS, helping out on projects. So yeah, I look back on it now, and I don't know when I realized how real it was, you know, by the day, but I know that within 15, 20 days, things changed so quickly, from thinking that we were going to be somewhat successful at being operational under new conditions to basically not having field work on the calendar at all, which for my branch is pretty much it.
Yeah, thinking back to when the NBA shut down, I think that was one of the big things that I remember. Just middle of the week, all of a sudden, oh, $1 billion plus sport just stopped, and you knew it was going to be pretty serious. And I actually had hockey tickets for the game on the 12th at the Capitals Red Wings, and the season shut down at 2 p.m. and that was it. So. Now, Allison, it looks like you've got a good connection right now, so I'm going to try to jump to you for your response to this. I mean, when you think back to last year in March when everything was shutting down, I mean, what was kind of the indicator for you? When did you know that this was going to be a big thing, or how did you know that it was going to be a lot longer than just a couple of weeks?
So when they actually shut down the country, was kind of when it hit home and we weren't allowed to leave, and are we essential or are we not essential? Our state society wrote a letter to the governor's office to clarify what was an essential worker. And since we do a lot of work outside doing boundary surveys and construction stuff, and you know, if the builders are still building, they still need surveyors. So the state did really good and made it find out if we were essential, and so that's really when it was like, oh gosh, you know, like we're kind of staying at home for a while. And I think it was shut down for like 2 weeks, and then about 2 weeks later we really started picking up and work, and I guess it's been really busy ever since. We haven't really slowed down besides that month. And so I don't know if it was disruptive in my line of work being a boundary surveyor, but it really made us more not essential, but like valuable, I guess, in the grand scheme of the world, because we were able to still continue with what we normally did.
Yeah, and I remember when cars stopped going on the road, you'd look out there on the expressway and it was just empty. And just thinking that this is the time to get out there and do construction staking. This is time to get out there and repave. Nobody's out. Now, Omar, can you speak to it from the academic standpoint? You have students at your university from all over the country, all over the world, and at that point, in midway through classes, I mean, how was it for you?
It's interesting because it was about the first week of the spring semester, and I had a student, and she came by for advising. So she had a couple questions, and she was actually wearing a mask. And she told me, she's all like, take care of yourself, make sure you wear a mask. And at that point, I didn't know what to think. So I came home, I had a discussion with my wife, and I was like, I think this COVID thing, it's a real deal. Like it's happening. And so, a month and a half later, we had a announcement at the universal level, basically the entire that there was going to be a pause of instruction. And I remember, and I was like, a pause of instruction, like what is this pause all about? So eventually that pause that was going to last 5 days was extended to 2 weeks. The next thing you know, it was a whole semester. And here we are, still paused in face-to-face instruction and slowly but surely making our way back. But when it first hit was after I started preparing for this online, and I said, oh, if they're asking us to devote, a whole week in the pause, that means that we're going online or virtual. And that's when I, realized how unprepared we probably all were for the online instruction. But that's when it really, really hit home. When I started preparing, and I was like, I got to do my homework. I got to figure a lot of this out. And that's really hit home, at least from the academic point, because I knew that it was going to be a whole new challenge.
Yeah, looking back, 5 days just seems like nothing at 14, 15 months later. That's, yeah, thinking back, you almost laugh at that. It's a week, whatever. We do have some questions in the chat now from, so we've got, what do you recommend for young surveyors to do to solve crises through the application of geoinformation? So from the technical side of it, how do you apply geoinformation to solving crises, or I suppose to any type of problem solving, changing logistics and using it to adapt?
Yeah, I mean, I can at least share some of the early efforts that we went through and that Noaa did, which is probably pretty similar. But I think using data in different ways, when you're presented the problem. So in this case, laying case rates and heat maps of COVID cases and those types of things over areas that we were doing work to assess risk in a completely different way that was new to us, right? Normally we assess risk from a aircraft safety standpoint or a marine vessel standpoint, or the risk that you could, physically be hurt, those types of things. So this was a completely different risk. You had to look at things and assess it in a different way. So I saw a lot of that early on, specific to this crisis. But I think that what it did was it put us in kind of to the tune of the second question there. It put some of my staff in the mode of layering different data that we hadn't looked at before. And we've carried that on now over the last year, partially because we had some extra time because we didn't have so many people dedicated to the field. But we're now looking at travel times to our job locations. We're visualizing per diem rates and things like that. So what we're trying to do is take the momentum that we had from a visualization standpoint, putting things on an online platform, and really try to make us more efficient overall when we do get fully back. So that was some of the biggest application that I saw specific to this of geoinformation.
If I may kind of come at it from a different, the VCSP is set up to issues around land rights and climate crises. So while we are quite focused on COVID right now, there are many other crises that are still going on, and in fact COVID has accelerated these crises. So I recommend, and this is very biased of me, trying to join in the efforts of the volunteer community surveyor program, because we are trying to use geoinformation to kind of geoinformation on a large basis. So we use young surveyors like yourself and myself to do large-scale mapping through things like OpenStreetMap, which we did back last year. I'm not sure if you're involved, Shakti, but that was through the SSSI Firewater Mapathon. And so that was to try and prepare the firefighters in Victoria, Australia for bushfire preparedness. So that's one way you can get involved. Or yeah, if you sign up on our mailing list, you can find out more about opportunities to solve crises with the application of geoinformation.
I'll say that it also provided, you know, geoinformation in general, how students are, you know, trained in a way. It provided a whole different environment and challenge, you know, having to teach them some of those hands-on fundamentals that you would typically do in the face-to-face environment, having them collect their own information and then process it and create a deliverable. This in general was a whole different challenge. So I think, but they were able to gain so many different skills on a professional level, whether it was communicating better. I would say they were able to use different platforms, and as tech savvy as they always are, I would say, you know, the students on their phones, now they have different technologies that they needed to learn, not only for fun, but for a learning or working environment. So I think it brought out definitely new skills that would be added to resumes, you know, whether it's a millionaire or multi-task or whatever they're doing, but there's a lot of different things that they were able to gain from this experience and this crisis, other than the geo-information as well.
Yeah, when you think about going through through your education and having the struggle early on, I think really pushes you to come out stronger. And I think, yeah, in many ways it's gonna there are. In many ways, it's been bad for their careers, but in many ways, though, down the road, we may see this as being a really good thing, where they come out with these skill sets that they can carry forward. Allison, did you have any comments on use of geoinformation? Did it change your workflow at all, or were things pretty well the same? And did even because you got a lot more work coming in, I would think, as summer went on and the fall came. Did you apply any geoinformation technologies to planning or anything like that?
No, I didn't apply any geo information technologies. It made me realize that I am not tech savvy like I thought I was, because doing these kind of meetings and having video on your computer and stuff like that, I was really lacking in that department and probably still am, but I'm coming along.
Do you think you've improved by being pushed into the deep end of the pool like we all have been, or you still have a lot to learn, you think?
Well, you see me now, so I'm getting better.
Yeah, I have noticed we've gotten a lot better at improvising too, where if a laptop goes down, we're good at bringing something else up just to keep the thing going. And I think today's been a great illustration of that. And I don't know if any of you called into the first session, the Europe Africa session, but there were a lot of there was a lot to learn with the platform there. And I think right now we're only 10, 15 minutes behind. They were pretty far behind by this point. So you learn as you go. Now, Davey, is there any anything from the NCEES perspective? Did it change how people signed up and took the exams? Anything like that?
Well, there was a ton of challenges that kind of went with the, the way the country started shutting down. I think somebody talked about how it really hit home when everything kind of started shutting down. I guess there's a couple of things that I wanted to hit on, because I think they were said somewhat, and I think they're important, because you made, Jacob, you made that mention that, years down the road, we might see this as a positive for some people because they've had to learn some new technologies. They've also had to branch out a little bit more. There's enough of us that are introverts that really kind of hate doing this video stuff, but we've learned to kind of do them. But I also think it's going to be a positive down the road when the next crisis hits, because I think that's something that we can all learn from. I mean, it's one of those things where you just can't just keep trudging on and think for the next 20 years things are going to be the same. There are things that are going to come up, and I don't know what they are by any means, and I sure as heck didn't predict a pandemic, but I do think how we react to crisis is something that this group of people that are out there working, especially young surveyors and young engineers in the construction fields and all those kinds of science and technology fields, I think will learn from this and be able to apply it through the rest of their career.
Yeah, and thinking about that, so I took the PS exam a couple of months ago during the COVID era, and it had me thinking that, well, when I went in that day, there may have been fewer people in the testing center. You had to wear a mask the whole time, but for the most part, it was probably about the same experience. You go in and do computer-based testing. You're spaced out, and that's for security reasons, so nobody looks over anybody else's shoulder. But I guess in the years leading up to it, were there was there any planning, any changes that you were making within your organization that actually had you better prepared for when this happened than you would have been 5 years ago, let's say? And how about we start with Davey, and I know Ryan will probably have a lot to say about it too, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we adapted a number of years ago was moving to our exams into a computer-based test. For those that have ever been through the NCSS exams, and if this is a younger crowd, they probably don't need the whole history, but we used to do all of our exams in a pencil and paper world, and there were these we did it twice a year, and we would have, in California, you would have thousands of people showing up to a site to take an exam. You might be in Juneau, Alaska with a few, but it was varying across the country. But if you start looking at the large metropolitan areas like a Houston or a Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, you just had this mass of people coming in and taking an exam. We started converting our exams to computer-based tests a number of years ago, and that turned out to be a real nice thing for us, a good thing for us. Because even though there was limited capacities, probably when you went and took the exam, there may have been spaces between. The idea of bringing 1,000 or 2,000 people into a massive site outside of Pomona just didn't happen. It just can't happen. But we can get 8 to 10 in a computer-based testing center. So that particular shift for the FS and the PS exam, not all of our engineering exams have converted to a computer-based test yet, but definitely the FS and the PS being able to move to computer-based tests was a really smart move on our part. Even though, again, we weren't thinking pandemic, but it just turned out to be a really good move.
I will add on a couple of things we did on the academic side. So we actually started using Zoom quite a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, and it was more because students, we were meeting with them at nights regarding projects, competitions, and so we would say, oh, you know what, everybody can be at home and we can just log in. And I remember using Zoom, once or twice a month or once in a blue moon, and then eventually that helped prepare us, at least get familiar with Zoom and its capabilities, but it also provided some other challenges where the face-to-face interaction, going through some training and providing them with the tools and the skills that they need to use either instrumentation you can't do through Zoom. you obviously need to touch, you need to push the buttons on the instruments, you need to figure that out, go out and do some staking, some topos, and for them to go through the entire workflow as a learning experience. So we were preparing slowly but surely, but we didn't think it was going to be the day-to-day activity, where you're logging in for an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours, going through a mode of instruction. I believe most academics already have PowerPoint slides, so that was a great deal. But then that also provided the challenge where you couldn't do in-class activities anymore. Like, you're doing breakout rooms, but with the students, they can be as interactive as they want in the breakout rooms, but being face-to-face, being able to walk around the class and kind of just throw a little hint to everybody at once. I had to go through every breakout room, see how everybody's doing, but now get a sense holistically, like how everybody was doing all at once. So the Zoom environment helped a lot, but you missed out on some of those unique experiences, I would say, that a lot of us gained through, going through our education, where you have those interactions with the instructor, or like those outside of the office conversations, either, in the parking lot conversations, or, outside of the office door conversations. But, in terms of the preparation, slowly but surely the Zoom became the thing, and here we are, and Zoom is our go-to tool.
Go ahead, Al.
I was
I
going
saw
to say the smartphone probably being more around these days, because I just upgraded to a smartphone. I had a little slide phone. So I think everyone having a smartphone and being able to do these kind of meetings maybe on their phone, and not having to, be stuck to a computer that's plugged into a wall that's only so far away. So that's probably something that helped years ago for this day and age.
Yeah, as Omar was kind of describing those challenges, I was in full agreement. I actually hired 4 people over the last year. Just the way timing of our hiring process was going. My first new employee started on the first day that federal employees were sent home. So it was like, here's your laptop, talk to you later. That has been, for a profession that we can all understand the value of, shoulder to shoulder experience and training and getting your hands on with equipment, and that took us some time to kind of wrap our head around how we were going to do this. We had surveys that had been planned with other partners, other agencies. We were videotaping how to calibrate tripods and sending it to them, and having people practice. And but it was difficult with new employees, because a lot of times you have the technical training, people learning nuances of their jobs and particular tasks that be assigned from a surveying standpoint, but you also have the organizational growth. As a new employee coming into an organization, you need to understand the rules, the policies, how you get paid, you have the political landscape, right? So all those things are things that new staff go through and have questions. So it took me a lot of effort and kind of time to figure out, how often I needed to meet, or what kind of venue I needed to provide some of these new staff members to ask questions openly. Because you can't do it in a normal staff meeting, right? A lot of people, I think, with the cameras in their face and new to an organization, don't want to ask the dumb question. So my calendar started filling up with a lot of one-on-one meetings, or specific topics to go through. So yeah, I mean, I think slightly different flavor, but I went through what Omar was describing quite greatly. I do think we expanded our skill set with technology and got more accustomed to this. and maybe, you know, again, with the little vignettes and things like that, maybe discovered a few new ways to train folks. And then luckily we got approval and permission after quite a few months. We got approval and permission to meet locally. Still were not traveling overnight on real jobs, but we did get approval to meet locally at our office with a limited number of people using safe protocols. So at least some of the new staff could start setting up equipment and things like that. And then it progressed from there. So, but that was one of the things that, to answer Jacob's original question, I was not prepared for. I did not see coming, and didn't really enjoy it from the start, but we figured it out. And all four new staff members are still working for me. So we didn't chase them away.
That's a really good sign. Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Sure. So I guess crossover here. You've triggered some thoughts, Ryan and Omar. I'm really glad you brought up the fact that you're doing one-on-ones, Ryan, and trying to find out new ways to kind of engage with your staff. So we had a team of 1-2 people a year ago, and now we have a team of 12. So we've literally become a team in COVID. So our team is remote. Most of us have never met in person. So we've had to be really creative and innovative, not only to have, for example, the Wisdom Workshop online, but also within a team to kind of bond as a team. And I see a few of our team on here, which is great to see. I guess one of the biggest things that I would say, if this were to happen again, that I'm really glad that we prepared with is having frequent team meetings and trying to create an environment where your team do feel comfortable to ask those silly questions that aren't actually silly, and allowing for them to share their own culture and their own ways of doing things. So that's something I think that we didn't plan to do, but it's just become our team culture, is to share our foods, our favorite foods, music, share our languages, and that has kind of put us in a position to become a really close-knit team that's ready to innovate and come across new challenges in full force. And the other piece that Omar, you kind of brought up was sort of educating online, and I'm no educator, but we are running what we call wisdom workshops. So trying to give young surveyors the tools they need so that they can go into in-country deployments with an awareness of them. And this was kind of the plan of the wisdom workshop lead, Israel Taiwo. He is actually he's an academic, educator, and he ran a MOOC prior to the wisdom workshop. So it was a week-long. We actually used Google Classroom, which was a learning experience in itself, that young surveyors could join the week before or during the week before the workshop to get some hands-on experience in the tools that we were going to use during the workshop. So we are lucky to have 2 partners that helped significantly with resources on that, Cadastre and GLTN. And yeah, I think that we're kind of in a unique perspective that we've been able to come together as a team, having to adapt anyway, because that's the environment we're in. And I definitely think that the technologies available in terms of collaboration online are something worth investing your time and learning in, because if this happens again, we know we need to be able to connect across state, country boundaries and everything.
Yeah, and I'm going to follow up on both what Ryan and Claire were just talking about here. So I'm in the same agency that Ryan's in, and that we're headquartered right outside of Washington, D.C. That's where a lot of the leadership is, a lot of the top scientists. But we have people that work there in all corners of the country. I mean, Ryan's in the field office in Norfolk. I'm a geodetic advisor out in Michigan. We've got other geodetic advisors, and we've got other some of the top minds in the agency are actually located outside of headquarters. So as you're working on a team, the way that it used to be, because I worked at headquarters before I moved out here. So I got to see it from that perspective, and I got to kind of watch all of this change, where a lot of the meetings would be whoever's in the room definitely had an advantage, or you'd have a phone in the middle of a table, you couldn't see anybody. And when the shutdown came, when all of this happened, we started doing a lot more video conferencing. So you could see your coworkers, you could see your coworkers that don't work in the same building as you. And I think that helps strengthen the teams, actually. And I'm noticing too, some of our meetings, because you don't get that run into people in the hallway, go meet it, and you're heating up your food in the kitchen at the same time. We're working in some of that small talk for 5 minutes here and there. Hey, what big plans do you have for summer? Or hey, what music have you been listening to? Just things like that, just to kind of build the team, because that's an important part of it. I mean, we do a lot of technical work, but it's not all numbers and math. I mean, there's a lot of other pieces to it. So I'm glad to hear all these different insights on that. Now, I think another big thing that came out of the shutdowns and not seeing people face to face like we're used to doing, is there a mental wellness aspect to it? I mean, video conferencing all day is exhausting, and it wears you out physically and mentally. So have you been doing anything with your teams to try to to alleviate some of that, or are there any good practices that you've discovered in the last year? I'm assuming that nobody knew anything about how to take care of that before we were constantly in video conferences. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Can make an attempt. I've learned a lot about mental health in the last year, as I'm sure many of us have, trying to look after ourselves and our families and our team. We actually had, when you asked me to join this panel, I kind of looked at what exactly were the challenges of 2020, and it's all the big ones. It's COVID, it's, I think I read there were $22 billion climate crises in the US alone. There's so many of these big hitters that are like, whoa, is the world ending? But actually in our team, we had a lot of individual challenges that required a lot of compassion and patience and empathy. And I think that our team has got a lot of that. I hope that the people online agree. So we had things like one of our team got malaria. Someone had a house fire recently. We had other health issues, immigration issues. This is an international team. So while we think over here in North America that the big crisis has been COVID, actually there's a whole lot of other things going on individually and on different continents that have been going on a long time. So I guess, yeah, my main message is to make sure that you're having a lot of compassion and patience with your team. And I mean, from my perspective, it's a lot easier to say that because we're volunteer run. But yeah, that's, I guess, my message there.
Yeah, Jacob, I think you hit on a bit of it too. I think as the year progressed, I think people loosened up a bit in meetings, and you did see that kind of natural sharing of, hey, how's your daughter doing? Or a lot of what I saw too was relating to other people. As Jacob mentioned, we've got people spread out all over. So I did a lot of talking with my colleagues, with kids as well early on about what their schools were doing. And, because everywhere was different, and district to district and county to county was different. So I think people started naturally relating to each other, being a little bit more open as time passed. I noticed a lot of my, I get a lot more texts. We get a lot more texts back and forth, group texts between staff members, just sharing what they did over the weekend or what they messed up in their garage, or whatever it may have been. So I think the mental health aspect is a huge one. I think we're still maybe understanding it day by day too. I think the technology was so easy. This technology was so easy that it was an immediate answer. And then, yeah, all of a sudden you find yourself staring at the little lens on your computer and a bunch of little faces for 5 or 6 hours a day. and you start realizing that it actually is quite taxing. So, and as I mentioned, as we were finally able to at least get some people mentoring with each other and kind of sharing those experiences, even if it was just one-on-one, I felt like I started to see my team kind of strengthen again. Just having a little bit of interaction, even though it wasn't 10 people at an office, 2 people is better than doing some of those tasks alone. So I think we need to continue to do it because I think this is here to stay, right? We will physically go back to certain activities, but I think us thinking about what work and what content we try to put into this format is a good conversation to have going forward, right? Because the technology is here, it's easy to use, but it probably doesn't apply to everything we've tried to apply it to over the last year. There was probably some triage work that had to be done, but now we probably need to really pick our spots as conditions improve. So I think it's a topic that's definitely not over.
I want to kind of just, I guess, just kind of follow with what Ryan just said. I think he's exactly right. We tried to ram everything into this Zoom meeting kind of format, and there's just some things that are better suited a different way. But I do think we've learned from this, and so the virtual meetings and some even virtual learning, because that's something Omar's mentioned. I mean, I just think there's going to be a change in the way we've done things. But I will say this, our first couple of meetings that we tried over the summer last year, we got a little bit of feedback with, yeah, you did the best you could, but it was just pretty dry. That was just, and I mean, engineers and surveyors aren't necessarily they're a fun bunch, but they're not necessarily I don't know what the word, not an entertaining bunch, right? And so it was just kind of funny. So we tried a lot of different things to have some social interaction after or before. And we've even had some of these events the night before some of these big meetings where you can play trivia or you play some kind of map game, you're traveling. And so I think we are all tried different things to engage our not only our office, but also just the other people that you're working with on a daily basis. So I think we've learned some things. So I agree with a lot of what Ryan had to say.
And Omar, Allison, do you have any?
Yeah, I'll add on some of the challenges, obviously, that were already mentioned. I would say in terms of the mental health, and I look over and I'm like, there's the bed and then here's the office. It's like knowing when to disconnect, when are you actually at home, when you're working, when you're telling your kid to do homework, as I'm telling my students to do their own homework. I think that brought on a lot of different challenges. One thing I did realize is I am not good at teaching K to 12 students. That definitely, I didn't really succeed with my kids. I had to take a 101 back to doing math all over again. Some of the things you learned, right? I think you just go in like, I don't remember doing math this way. Like, let me figure this out. But I think, in terms of the mental health, I think one of the things I learned is being in, I guess one of the things about going to the office is you go to the office, you go there, you work, you come back, and you probably got other things going on. And now you're here, your home is your office, is the place where you're doing everything. How do you disconnect from one or the other, right? And then the kitchen's right there, so you're always going to the kitchen and grabbing something because it feels like you get hungry every 15 minutes. So I think trying to figure all of this out, how to organize yourself while there's, every bedroom in the house has somebody doing homework or somebody doing something, somebody working. Like, how do you make this function? And I think that is where I think once you figure that out, things can become a little more stable on the mental side. Like if you can figure out, okay, I'm gonna work until this time and then I'm home now, I'm not at work, then that helps out a lot. And I think that's what helped me a lot is just, you know, because I would, you know, the email is always there. They're going to keep coming. And, you know, one thing we all do this when we were students, you know, 2, 3 in the morning. Oh, why not email the professor and see if he'll answer right now? But, you know, eventually knowing when to disconnect and when to stay connected, I think that helped me out a lot, you know, especially a few months into it. So that was my mental 101.
Thanks, Omar. I think that's something that we can relate to. Allison, what was your experience with this?
So I started my business the beginning of 2019. So I had one season of working from home because our office is out of our house, and there's just me and 2 other employees, and the other 2 employees are the other side of the business. We're United Grading and Surveying. So I'm the surveyor, and then my husband, and we have a truck driver. So they were kind of out doing their thing. But in 2019, I was very lonely because I went from like an office staff to being around a lot of people, and I'm a very social person and I like to say hi to people, to being by myself a lot. And then 2020 like made it even worse because you weren't allowed to like go out and see people. So I found myself talking to people on the phone a lot more, like if you had a salesperson call, or if you had a client call and, you know, try to get an estimate on something. I found myself talking to them quite a bit more just because I didn't need to do Zoom meetings because I didn't have the area where I was like not in the office and needed to communicate with people. So it was quite a bit different. I feel like to promote was just being in touch with people that you knew, you know, that were going through kind of the same things that you were, and just trying to battle through it and spend time outside. And I guess we got a lot more done at home, and the yard looked really good last year.
Now, because you're a small business owner, you have to interact with clients a lot. And how did those relationships change? I mean, were the requests different? Did the phone calls go differently this past year than they did the first year? Did you notice anything with the mental wellness of the people outside of your business that you interacted with?
Well, it was nice last year because you wanting to follow you around and go to all your corners. It was more like you got to keep your distance. And I was pregnant all of last year, so it was nice not having people want to like touch my stomach. And so COVID kind of was a blessing in disguise for me, being pregnant, not having to kind of deal so closely with the public. I was able to just get there, do my job, and if I didn't knock on the door, they understood because it was, you know, you have to social distance. So it might have made things better besides being lonely.
Yeah, another one of those silver linings that came out of this. And that kind of brings me to my next question or type of question. So we went through, we had a big disruption. In 2019, we did everything in person. We got in the car, we sat in traffic for an hour, we went to a cubicle, we hated ourselves. We got in the car, drove home. We didn't have time to do anything because we were too busy making money to pay for that car that we drove everywhere. So moving forward, what types of things do you think are going to change? Are we going to go to a hybrid environment? Because we don't like entirely video conferencing. That's exhausting. That's way too much. But on the other side of it, being in person every single moment, maybe that's not necessary. I mean, what are your opinions of this?
I'll give you my approach, or what I think is going to be my approach coming out of it. Granted, when we send field staff out on remote assignments, that won't change, right? I mean, though I think we now have the tools to maybe communicate a bit better, when folks are remote. But I think that when we rotate staff in or have people, quote unquote, back in the office, I think we'll see a lot more flexibility. I think our team, we will probably see people, maybe be in the office 2 or 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. There are a lot of times where we as field staff have to be hands-on. We have to configure equipment. We have to get things ready at the office. We have to pack trucks, maintain trucks, things like that, that we have no substitute. There is no virtual substitute for putting air in a truck's tires. But I also think that when we are doing data processing, when we are doing reporting, technical analysis, things like that, I think a lot of people have now been made aware that they're probably a little bit more productive at home when they can get the kids to school easily, when they don't have their boss walking in the door asking random questions and things like that. So I think the downside that I've seen, and I've may be slightly remorseful if we do see more teleworking, is that I do feel like we've lost a little bit of the organic conversation, a bit of the natural brainstorming, the coffee talk that somehow leads to solving a surveying problem. So I think we have to continue to, as a community and as supervisors and professors and colleagues, I think we have to continue to foster that and not give up on that. But I do think you'll see an increased telework, at least from our agency. And I think it will overall be pretty healthy. And so that's my prediction, at least from my world. And that includes me personally. I think I will, even as a supervisor, I think I will feel compelled to be at the office and talking to people, but I also see the value in taking a day or two at home and having that productive time there too.
Well, I guess from my perspective, my personal perspective would be the ideal situation is 2 days or 3 days a week. Either way, working from home, working from the office. Again, that brings with it challenges if you're doing field work as well. But in terms of the VCSP, I guess we started as an online team. We do online partnerships. We do everything online. I would like to see us continue that because that's the only way we can stay connected. However, I would really like to see our team come together if it so happens that we can next year at the Young Surveyors Conference. And I guess our e-volunteering is always going to be online. So that's certainly something that kind of was set up already for the VCSP, but I guess we now have more of an idea of the tools we can use to make that more efficient and more connected.
Go, Davey.
Yeah, well, I will just I think Ryan again hit a lot on it. I think you're going to see a change in cultures in a lot of organizations and companies. Those that can work remotely will probably do it a little bit. Will do it more than 15, 18, 2 months ago, 5 years ago. So I do think we'll see a somewhat of a shift in the fact that remote work will be more of an idea. I mean, more than just an idea. It'll be a thing that happens as we go forward. The one thing that I also, from our perspective, from an organization, is as an organization, we host around 90 meetings a year. A lot of them at our headquarters, but a lot of them around the country. Meeting of our boards, meeting on working on exam questions, and I think that will be curtailed a lot. I think we've learned this year that there's a lot of things that we can do. We get together and we meet, but there's a lot of these things that we can do virtually, and cut out some of those meetings. At the same time, I think it's still very, very much a necessity. Those having a cup of coffee, talking, the brainstorming thing that was mentioned. I think Jacob, maybe Ryan. There's things like that you miss when you have virtual meetings. So I do think you'll see less in person, but it's not going to shift all the way to like a virtual world for us anyway.
Yeah, Omar, did you have something to add?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think from the academic perspective, we've come to realize that there are some classes that could potentially be taught online. You know, we are in Southern California. We know a lot of our students are commuting from, an hour, 2 hour away. And being that where we are, there's obviously always traffic no matter where you go. And, one of the silver lining was one actually, and I'll answer the question now that I remember. One day I went outside and I was like, why does it smell funny out here? And then my wife says, well, that's because you're actually breathing air and not not anything else. And I said, oh, that's what it smells like. I totally forgot about that. But I would say, in terms of mode of instruction, labs definitely need to be, hands-on. I don't think that's going to change. I think the students need to grab the tools. They need to, go ahead and learn from, just learn by doing and, going through the entire experience. I think those students that are in the first year, second year need to be on campus, need to have that social interaction, need to engage with other students, need to meet new people that are coming into their field. They definitely need it the most. Coming into, as you mentioned earlier, if you have a new employee, now imagine having a, 18-year-old, 19-year-old coming in and not knowing anybody and just being on Zoom and trying to get through it without having those connections. Or who do I message other than the professor about the question? Like, who do I ask? Like, how do I, so that engagement is very, very important, as much as you guys mentioned the textbook and everything else, but I think that social interaction, being very engaged on activities, extracurricular activities, whether it's a competition, whether it's a club, whether it's just showing up to the club, not because you're interested in the topic, just because they're giving out free pizza and then you see a friend there, I think we missed out on a lot of those. And, this senior commencement, graduation day, which is the highlight probably of, every college grads, walking through the stage and, those students from last year and those students from this year not having the opportunities to go through it. But I think, some classes will go online, but the majority of them, especially those in our field that need the hands-on, will go back to the normal face-to-face.
Yeah, and Allison, I want to get your opinion on this too, because I know most of the interaction that I've had with you has been at in-person meetings, in-person conferences, and they have been very productive. So what are your thoughts on this traveling all the time, I guess where does the line get drawn? What's the magic number of you can travel to 4 meetings a year and everything else can be done online and you rotate it, or what do you think?
I really miss the in-person meetings for like NSPS and even our state society meetings. Like, I just don't think it's the same. You don't have the connection with people. It's that mental wellness, you get out, you get to meet people, you take a bus ride to somewheres and you get to have a conversation with an older surveyor telling you about all of his tips and tricks, and you're just never going to get that in a Zoom meeting or in a platform like this. And so I really hope that they don't say, oh, it's cheaper and, it's possible to do these meetings online. Let's not have, people going to Washington, D.C. to meet together. So I think I don't know. I really hope that they really do the in-person stuff, because I think that's really beneficial, especially for the younger people attending some of those meetings and networking and learning. But on the other hand, I know a lot of people that are in the office atmosphere and they really like working from home. Not all of them, but there's some offices closing down here because they're not going to have a front building anymore. They're just going to have everyone work from home to kind of save on that overhead. So I see both sides, but they really should have national meetings and state meetings and get everyone together.
Yeah, and the role that I'm in as a geodetic advisor, a lot of my job is traveling to these meetings to meet with people face to face because there is that value. But at the same time, I cover 4 states in the upper Midwest that always have their meetings in January and February that's when the snowstorms like to come through. So having that stress on top of shaking hands with thousands of people and everything else, it might be good to go to a hybrid though, where if I can send a video one year and be in person the next year, that way I still get to see everybody, to get to meet everybody, get to know people, but I can still get to everything else without driving all over the place. But yeah,
You can't have a beer with me.
I know, but yeah, I see both sides of it though, and yeah, there is no substitution for that in person. But at the same time, it depends on how many of these you're trying to get to. I think, where I think a person does get exhausted in either case, whether you're doing all video or you're doing all in person once a week for months. That can get to be a lot too.
Mm.
So
Can I just add to that?
yeah,
Number
go
one,
ahead, Claire.
I love that pizza and beer is internationally the bringer together of all surveyors. And two, I think I see a networking button on the left-hand side here. I guess we're new to Hopin, but maybe we can start looking at how we can use Hopin to its full effectiveness, because that is certainly something that I miss as well, Alison, is I've met a lot of the young surveyors on this call right now, and I've met them in person at Young Surveyors conferences, and I'd call them all friends for life. So I really hope we do get back to being able to do it in person, but I also think that the tools are there, and if this happens again, we need to look at how we can stay connected and kind of have those little chats over perhaps that networking button or something similar.
Yeah, and that's kind of how that networking button works. And for this young surveyor event, because we were doing 3-hour chunks of time, we didn't really have a whole lot planned using that this time. But for the working week that comes up in June, it's going to be a perfect opportunity, because that goes on all week. If you show up, instead of just sitting in reception, what you can do, go to networking, and it will randomly pair you with somebody else for 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to talk to them. You can share contact information, and then you can go on to the next person. And that's a good way to, you can meet new people, but you can also get the information where if you do want to have a longer meeting with somebody, you can get that in there.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like 3 minutes speed dating.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I'm not sure what we have planned in the last little section of today, but that could be an option. Maybe we just end up with a networking event and just get to meet whoever's out there. Now we are starting to run low on time, and I've been communicating with James over in the other session to kind of see when he wraps up, and I don't think he's got that much more time. So logistically, after this event, we will go back to the sessions, and there's an interactive plenary session. And I like that ice cold beer idea that I just saw pop up in the chat. So there's a interactive plenary session. We'll all go into that, and that way the panelists can be there to answer questions. The speakers in the other session can be there to answer questions. Jordan from the keynote can be there as well, and we can keep this event going over there. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to end on a light note, or I hope it's a light note. Oh, there's Atlas, so you can say hi to Atlas, future surveyor, I would assume. Already carrying a plumb bob, I'm sure. But no, I wanted to. So the other big challenge that I remember popping up in the news last year was murder hornets. So did anybody have any run-ins with that? Any concerns or have any stories? Did that factor into anybody's field planning moving forward? No.
To this country from a country nothing hurts you. So that was very terrifying to know something else was out there that could kill me. But no, I didn't have any changes to my planning. New Zealand's a very safe place.
Yeah, New Zealand is a beautiful country, and I was there for a couple days, and the weather right there on the coast, it's you can tell it just never gets too hot, never snows. It's just right perfect. So well, I'm trying to decide on what to do here. We're coming up on the end of the hour. If we want to all go into the interactive plenary session, I don't know if we really have enough time to make the networking really worth it for just a couple minutes before the other session wraps up. Did anybody have any last words or last questions?
The Bucks would have won if they didn't have to stop work playing basketball.
You know, I feel the same way too.
What is it about Americans? And it always comes back to sports.
Because it unifies everybody. In the grand scheme, it doesn't matter, but it gives you something to
That's
think
true.
about and to talk about, no matter who you run into.
Yeah.
So when Jacob said he knew things were really going south when the when the NBA decided to just go away, it hit more home here when the Masters decided to say we're not going to play the Masters. And so it's like, oh, okay, well then this is a thing. We need to take some of this on.
Yeah, because that's an outdoor event too. But back then we didn't know, and we had to err on the side of caution. I think because the research just wasn't there yet. When you have something that you just don't know anything about, other than it's killing a lot more people than most other illnesses do, and it's a lot more contagious. Yeah, you have to be cautious. But,
Can I make a little plug?
Sure.
There's hopefully questions out there of how to get involved. The VCSP is about to look for some new team members. So if you're interested, keep an eye on our social media pages, which are the Young Surveyors Network social media pages.
Yeah, and what kind of opportunities? So say travel restrictions are done. Say a young surveyor from somewhere in the U.S. signs up for VCSP.
Mm-hmm.
What are the possibilities? Could they end up in Madagascar in 6 months, or what?
Maybe not 6 months. So it looks like this next year we'll try to continue the in-country. So we have a few different paths. In-country is trying to go across countries to learn about customs and different cultures, but also use your skills to help the community. At the moment, we have 7 young surveyors from each of Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda actually in those 3 countries, because obviously it's not appropriate to travel and not safe to travel at the moment. But longer term, in country will be across continents, across countries. And then the other path we have is e-volunteering. So that's the way to get involved. In the meantime, if you are in the US, Canada, maybe longer term, I'd like to see us get involved with doing more, using our skills with Indigenous communities. And yeah, there's wisdom workshops, one or two every year. So yeah, you can join that way. Oh, and I should add, it's not just the young surveyors, it's also, there's an opportunity for mentoring, a volunteer community surveyor mentor. It's a new role that we've introduced.
Yeah, so everybody can participate, everybody can help, and even if you can't take the time off to go travel somewhere, you can still make an impact. So yeah, it's everybody can make a difference if you show up and help and do it.
Roll up your sleeves, get stuck in.
So, well, I think now that we're coming up on, I've got 5:30 where I'm at, and we're scheduled for the whole event until 6. How about we move over to the interactive plenary session? We can continue the discussion over there, and see who all else joins, and we'll wrap up the event over there for about the next half hour. So thank you, Paul. I thought that was a lot of great insight. It was nice to hear everybody's opinion, everybody's ideas on this, because you all come from different areas, different sectors, different. You have to approach things differently. So I think I learned a lot here, and I hope everybody else out there in the audience did too. So thanks again for being here, for all of your insight, and I'll see you over in the interactive plenary.
Thanks, Jacob. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you,
Thanks.
everybody.